Let's start with a quick reality check. McKinsey found that nearly 70% of digital transformation efforts miss the mark. And it's usually not because the tech didn't work, it's because teams weren't aligned, users weren't considered early enough, or the problem wasn't fully validated before development started. We actually recently saw this firsthand with a Fortune 500 company. They spent over $2 million building an internal platform to streamline operations. But 6 months after launch, fewer than 20% of employees were using it. Different teams had different ideas of what it was supposed to do. The user's experience was clunky, and no one had tested it with real users. In the end, they had to hit pause and go back to the drawing board. That's not just a budget issue, it's a trust and momentum issue too. Unfortunately, stories like this are pretty common, but they're also preventable. That's what we're here to dig into today, how design sprints, or as we call them at 10 Pros, the Lean Product Accelerator, help teams avoid these pitfalls by getting aligned early, testing ideas fast, and building with real confidence. I'm Zena, a tech writer at Espacio Media Incubator and a contributor to Entrepreneur the Sociable, amongst other publications, who covers all things AI. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by Peter and David. David Herring is Senior Director of Product Design and Innovation and helps organizations from global enterprises to early-stage startups craft winning product strategies and reduce risk while adopting emerging technologies like AI. He leads lean discovery workshops to accelerate how teams uncover opportunities, align around a shared vision, and move faster toward delivering real business outcomes. He also brings a strong focus on accessibility and regulatory compliance, ensuring user experiences are both impactful and responsible from the start. Peter Hesse is EVP and partner at 10 Pros, where he oversees global delivery and compliance across the organization. Peter focuses on embedding security and governance into digital transformation initiatives across industries, with a strong emphasis on healthcare and life sciences. With over 25 years of experience in technology, Peter has consistently delivered innovative solutions that balance technical integrity, security, and usability. So starting with my first question, which is for David, organizations often discover, sometimes too late, that different teams have different understandings of the goals or that users don't know how to use the solution once it's built. These disconnects lead to wasted time, effort, and budget. So the question is, what kinds of problems arise when teams skip upfront alignment and validation, like when users don't understand the product or internal teams aren't on the same page?
Whenever a team's misaligned, you're going to get delays. You're going to have teams going in branching directions, and ultimately you're going to have frustrated stakeholders. I see it as really trying to do a combination of solving the right problem and solving the problem in the right way. You can address a real customer problem, and it seems very elegant, but once it's out there in the real world, it's not uncommon to see some constraint in their workflow that just makes the solution impractical. If I could just share a quick example of that, there's a digital solution for a government agency, and it's a paper-based interview process, interviewing families, and the field staff were like, hey, we need a digital version of this. We're doing it on paper. It's really slow. They created something and put it out there, and everybody hated it. My team was brought in, and it was just as simple as realizing that they're arranging the physical files based on the physical location of where people are seated. And so as elegant as the solution was, that was just a reality that wasn't accounted for, which made the solution not work. The goal of doing early discovery is to reduce those risks, to identify them up front before you even do any development. In addition to solving the right problem in the wrong way, almost always on a project something gets missed. It could be something small, it could be something big, but in doing early discovery, you're mapping out that holistic experience from end to end. So you're seeing not just like the happy path, or how does a person achieve some outcome that they're trying to achieve, but you're also looking at what are those edge cases that could come up. And so you're helping the team kind of identify where things may break down, but also planning for how to recover, from those. So that's kind of a big one that I see, of not doing, a thorough early discovery. In this process, we bring in stakeholders that, represent decision makers, subject matter experts. It could be like somebody who focuses on customer service, or just whoever's the relevant subject matter expert. But the thing is like everybody, when you bring people together and you're collaboratively aligning on a vision and a strategy, everybody walks away with a shared vision about what's being built, but also why. I think the biggest thing from this is that we are addressing the big assumptions head on. We're identifying them and we're stating them. And when you can challenge them, test them, and sometimes you test it and you're like, yeah, that's right, and then you get confidence. Or you may kind of test it and realize, okay, there's a potential issue here, and then you start looking at other solutions with input from people. Because they give their input, everybody's bought in. Because you were able to figure out that problem and a solution, then yeah, everybody's going to move forward with confidence and shared sense of direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just makes me think, you talk about the shared vision and really homing in on the why, for instance, of a product, which is so important. Having the end user in mind and what needs you're fulfilling there and what purpose. And as well, in terms of that shared vision, having that variety of perspectives only makes the shared vision stronger, or realizing the shared vision even better, I suppose. That's the
Yeah.
takeaway that I'm really getting from this. Um, Thank you for that. Now, this next question is for you, Peter. So, what are some of the ways this approach helps reduce risk and uncertainty in product development, especially with AI now in the mix?
It doesn't necessarily reduce the risk of the process. What part of the goal of these discovery processes is to address these risks head on. So, like, surface those critical unknowns early in the process, because you need to get the clarity there so that it doesn't bite you later in the process. A lot of times, like you mentioned that example, where an organization maybe fails to address a risk early in the process, it's still a risk. It's going to be a risk whether it's addressed early in the process or later in the process. But when you're so far down the development path, it then becomes much harder to course correct. So we always talk about, being able to, when we're in an agile development process, to make those small course corrections. But the early discovery process makes sure that our compass is pointed at the end goal. We're aiming at the right thing. You mentioned also AI. Now, AI is also sort of brings in some unique and interesting limitations and concerns potentially. You have to worry about the quality of the data that might be used in an AI-based effort. Limitations of the model that you're using, maybe bias in the data, and worry about those things, and making sure you're at least addressing the fact that there might be bias in the data. There might be these concerns with the model. My background being in security, I'm always also worried about regulatory implications. Are there compliance constraints? Are there security policies or security standards like HIPAA or PCI or something like that that we need to be thinking about? All of this, trying to get those things addressed early so that we can avoid them as pitfalls later, whether it's the responsible use of AI or just, having a product that works well for the end user.
Yeah, that point that you raised about, the feasibility of using AI and watching out for those risks that come with AI and those potential pitfalls will obviously cause processes to trip up and slow down. Which is actually part of my next question, which is for you, David. Does AI itself help accelerate discovery and strategy? Like, this is obviously assuming in a given scenario that the company has, lined up all their ducks and made sure that they're AI ready. So yeah, how it accelerates these strategies.
It absolutely does. And I think the biggest way that it does that is that it helps communicate ideas a lot faster and a lot more clearly. Like, to give a couple of examples of ways that, we've used AI in our discovery process and strategy. We were approached by an individual that had access to data that wasn't available before. And it was this very used aspects of like, augmented reality and things like that, and kind of a unique way. And his whole goal was like he needed to raise funds, and he was going to this meeting. He was like, how do I communicate the idea of this to these people? They aren't going to get it, but we also don't have time to like design things out. We did a storyboard, and just being able to define like, okay, these are the main characters or personas that are using this experience or impacted. It's like a family and a kid. What is this experience that we're trying to create? And so just showing like how they're going through that experience end to end, it was a really effective communication tool. And he was able to, raise all the funds that he needed to. I mean, the other thing too is just like, we say like a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, clickable, like functioning, proof of concept is probably worth like 1,000,000. And so we use AI to, we were talking earlier about mapping out the end-to-end experience. One of the things that we'll do is we'll be like, okay, what is a critical moment that has to get right? Or what is a friction area where there's an opportunity to innovate? And we can use some of these AI tools, and we have, to build out those pieces of an experience so that you can actually use it and interact with it and be like, does this make sense? Is it solving the problem in an elegant way? And we've seen customers use that to put it in front of users, or put it in front of stakeholders, or put it in front of investors.
That's that's pretty incredible, and it's actually, that whole storyboard aspect is something that I actually hadn't considered before. Like, it's not something you immediately necessarily associate, with things as technical as, like discovery and product development and putting AI in the mix. Um, but I suppose like you've touched on some aspects of my next question, which is, how do you help companies leverage AI effectively and meaningfully? And that, to me, like that is truly impactful what you're doing there. I mean, for instance, that person who's able to secure the funding because of being able to envision it. But I'm also wondering, like, is there this is also a kind of part of my next question as well, in terms of, leveraging AI effectively and meaningfully, like helping companies with that. Is there predictive capabilities as well in there? Like what?
ChatGPT did a really great thing, like introducing people to the possibilities of like AI. But it also kind of made, in a lot of people's minds, like when they think of AI, it's like it's, ChatGPT or like, generative AI. But you mentioned like predictive analytics and machine learning. So, there are a lot of different applications of AI that can add, efficiencies. I'd say, for us, our approach to AI, and helping companies leverage it, we kind of focus on, kind of through three lenses. The first one is like everyday productivity. Like, are there things that your employees are doing that are maybe tedious? Maybe there's an opportunity there to add efficiencies to those processes. The other lens is just like rethinking core functions, right? So, you may have like a customer service function. What if, AI comes in as like the first line? And, there's a good way to do it, and there's a bad way to do it. And we've seen some examples, I think, of like, I'm not talking about like you're calling into customer service and it's like a very robotic voice, like press 1 or press 2. But, with the newer models, I mean, these conversations are very natural, whether it's through chat or a voice conversation. So, kind of looking at, core organizational functions. And then the third one is, you know, helping organizations to launch new and innovative new product solutions. I think the thing that's kind of underlying all of this, and it's a lens that's important to us, is like the human aspect, right? Um, the idea is like, how can we use AI to support your human experts, right? You have people who are working on your team with expertise, with intuition. So how can we help them in their work to use AI to be even more effective?
That is such an interesting point, that human and machine synergy that you raise, which is there's been a lot of resistance to AI in the workplace, understandably, because people feel threatened or they feel that it might just hinder processes or be yet another tool that they have to deal with. So this leads into my question for you, Peter. How do you help teams gain internal buy-in and momentum, especially when there is that skepticism or resistance where they're like, "Oh Lord, here's yet another thing to deal with on top of my already super busy day."
I think the biggest thing when it comes to that, again, one of the reasons why we feel early discovery is key in the process is to create that buy-in and create that sort of team camaraderie and environment. So the first thing we do is to really focus in on what the end business goal is. Like, what's the value that's going to be delivered by this solution? If we all can agree on that as a North Star, and we're all heading towards that value, it makes so much of the other conversations or concerns easier. It becomes around the outcomes, not around the technology, not around the process or the features. We can use AI sometimes to help us break down some of these things and reframe them so that we can take a complex idea and break it down into some simpler use cases and so forth. Another really big thing that we find works is to co-create with the folks that are going to be, part of this process. So David mentioned before about bringing in stakeholders. The stakeholders are not there to watch the process as we, deliver it from our perspective. They need to be part of that process. So David does exercises with the team to have them whiteboard out potential ideas, write things on Post-it notes, and share their thoughts and processes. Because when you are part of the creation of that solution, you have that ownership mindset, and therefore you're not that feeling a recipient. You're going to go forward from that experience, sharing it with your teammates, with the rest of your organization, because you were part of ownership of it. So it's a great way to build trust and sort of take a skeptic and turn them around to be really somebody that's in favor of the solution.
Yeah, that ownership, like it just propels vested interest, and there's almost like something, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I almost take it personally when things don't necessarily go to plan, when I know that I've got so much of this vested ownership in something that I really want to see come to life and, help people in some way. And I love that, that interaction and stuff as well that you mentioned, like even writing out, having that brainstorming aspect. I think it really ties in with that storyboarding approach as well, David, that you were talking about earlier. Um, Besides that, Peter, what else can a discovery process uncover for businesses?
So besides just like the features and the functionality, sometimes the discovery reveals gaps in the organization, both in terms of their readiness to move forward, as well as maybe some things that they thought existed that didn't exist. Things like, not having data governance or AI governance really thought about, um, unclear ownership of different parts of their own process within the organization. Oh, who's supposed to take care of that? I'm not really sure. We should ask Joe, like that kind of thing. Um, it can reveal friction between the business teams and the IT teams. I mean, sometimes we'll do these discovery processes just with business folks, but they're hesitant because they know when they bring this back to their technical teams, they're going to face, sort of, difficulty because they know that they're not working well together. One of the more interesting things, and I've been fortunate over my long career at 10 Pearls to be part of many, many of these discovery efforts. We've gone into situations where a customer is like, "I want to build X," and we come out of 3 days worth of discovery, and we're not building X anymore. We're now building Y and Z. And because they've realized that, again, when we focus in on the business goal, that maybe the thing that they thought would get them to that business goal wasn't as effective, and instead they need to take a different approach, and so it might be more valuable than what their original idea was to head in a completely different direction. And it's only by, again, focusing on a business value, breaking everything down into its sort of individual components, and then putting something together, co-creating something together. That's how you reveal that.
It
If I could add one
it
thing
makes
to
Yeah, of course.
I was just gonna say, so we do this exercise called Crazy Eights, and we basically have everybody there draw, sketch out 8 ideas, for a solution. And the idea is like we're not trying to design an interface; we're trying to capture ideas, and we share them out. And I can't like how many times, we come out of that, and when people are sharing ideas, they're like, "I never thought of that part." And it gives them an inspiration for how to kind of evolve their thought. And so we can take the best of all of these different things, and we're weaving together um you know great ideas coming from everybody. So there's again, it just reinforces that shared vision and alignment and the buy-in.
Yeah, that sounds like a really fun process, I have to say. And I can imagine those conversations and like those sessions can get really wild with all these, this influx of ideas coming from all angles. But I can see why it also gives the bigger picture, just like being able to step back and seeing, Peter, as you mentioned, those holes, those gaps in existing processes, in existing setups within an organization. And that's actually, I know, for instance, and I'm sure you've come across, both your careers, quite a bit of this, that most organizations are battling with like siloed departments to some degree, which is obviously a massive issue. And like part of the reason that tech is also seen as a benefit, like AI, for instance, is being able to help bridge those silos. And talking about business processes, like obviously there's been more of a focus on like productivity and efficiency and output and all of that. David, for leaders under pressure to do more with less, how does this process help them maximize resources while still delivering strategic value?
One of the things that we do in our LPA process is a tech assessment. What is their current, tech stack? If we need to introduce technology, let's only introduce those things that are going to deliver that experience you're aiming for, building on top of and leveraging what you've done so far. It's a strategy and, workshop where we're focused on those things that are going to add the most value. So if there's something that's as simple as common interactions like signing in, or there's solutions out there that tried and tested, let's focus on those things that are going to add real value so that you're like optimizing what your team is focusing on. So I think in some of those ways, you can achieve a lot, leveraging what you already have, but focusing in on those things that really move the needle, leveraging kind of tried and true where it makes sense, so that you can focus on those value adders.
Yeah, so the bottom line is it's quality over quantity when it comes to integrating new tools. I'm inferring from what you're saying as well. And then also the importance of being able to, layer solutions within processes. Does it make sense within existing infrastructures, for instance, to avoid further headaches? Because that's the last thing people want, right? Great. Peter, can you talk about a time when security, compliance, or trust was a blocker? Like we talked about, I just mentioned very briefly, infrastructure hurdles, for instance, when bringing in new tools and figuring out new processes, for instance, and how you helped a client work through that in the sprint or early phase.
I could almost not tell you a situation where it wasn't a blocker, right? Like, you know, as you mentioned before, a lot of organizations have silos or have concerns, and there are, for good reason, there's a lot of people in the security and privacy field that they feel like that's, their most important job is to protect the information, protect the end user, whatever it is. And, sometimes they become like the department of no. They just say no to everything because it's the safer move, right? I used to joke with people and say, how can I protect this information so that nobody will ever access it? It's like easy, encrypt it and then put it in a safe and sink the safe to the bottom of the ocean. Then nobody will be able to get that information. Aside from that, there are going to be situations where there are risks. So all of this is to say, part of it is, the most important part of it is to identify the concerns early and think about what are the ways in which we can mitigate those concerns. So I'll give you an example of, working with a healthcare analytics firm. Their security department was absolutely dead set against, a solution that used some of this healthcare data in an AI scenario. They didn't trust the AI to be able to keep the information safe. They didn't trust the AI to be able to not hallucinate the data, and they were worried about the outcomes that it might create. So we worked with them to generate some ideas on how we could address these concerns while still meeting the end business value. I mentioned before about homomorphic encryption, or in a previous session, where you can encrypt some of the data, but still, be able to operate on it, do your analytics or your mathematics on that data, even when it's in its encrypted form. So we used some mechanisms like that so that they felt the information was still going to be encrypted at all times and was never going to be released fully into the AI. That helped them with part of it. Another part of it was to use a fully internal AI rather than using an outside service, a solution, on the internet or something like that, to build their own models, to host their own models within systems that they trust and they could verify, and therefore they could use it to their advantage. So by involving their compliance and security teams, making them part of the process, making them aware of what their options were, and addressing them, we were still able to meet that end goal and gain their confidence. Which got us to be able to get to that green light rather than taking months and months and months after we've developed the solution to get the green light to start this thing operational.
It's always probably incredibly frustrating when there's so much innovation that's about to happen and then someone just draws up the red light saying absolutely not. But it's nice to know that there are feasible workarounds that also offer that flexibility as well, so that key stakeholders feel comfortable with moving forward and that they have the right guardrails in place throughout. So yeah, that's huge. David, walk me through the LPA process a little bit more. What can someone expect when working with you, for instance? Like, what's your tried and tested approach to this?
Depending on where the client is and things like that. I mean, we could do it remotely or in person is always a lot more fun. But there are kind of three main phases. The first one is we do a deep dive. We understand, okay, what's the problem area? What's the opportunity space? What are your business goals? And two of the main things that we try to get out of this are, who are the personas? So who are your direct users and your indirect users? And what are those outcomes that the solution is that's the value that the solution is providing for them. So the personas and then their outcomes. What we do is in the next phase, which is strategy, we figure out, okay, how do we connect those personas to those outcomes? And that's what we call the user journey. That's where we do the mapping of that end-to-end process. And, we can identify those areas where like this is a really major friction area, or there's an opportunity to innovate, or, this is a key moment where, the experience has to be, perfect. And we'll focus in on those, a bit more than some of the other areas. At the same time, we're doing that technical assessment, so, our technical experts are talking with their technical experts to understand, it, and again, kind of depending on where the client is, and just even the maturity, maybe they have a tech stack that they're using, so we see how can we leverage that, or maybe they don't have a tech stack, but we understand at least what are their team, which technologies are their teams familiar with, or, what's going to make the most sense for them. And all of that goes into the design phase, the third phase, where we're designing the technical architecture. We're designing either wireframes or a functional, a proof of concept that we were talking about before. And so, at the end of that, we have for them basically a roadmap to their MVP. They've got wireframes and designs. They have user journeys. They have personas, and again, which is really important because you're identifying like what are their motivators, what are their constraints, what are their biggest frustrations and biggest needs. And we've got user stories and a phased out roadmap that makes it really clear about how to achieve that vision that everybody's aligned on. Okay, this is the vision, everybody's aligned on it, and this is everything that you need to get there.
And let me just jump in to say that that alignment between sort of the stakeholders and the business, various teams, and the development team is what helps us all understand how big is that bread box, right? How hard is it going to be to build this thing, for real? Because that's also an area, getting back to where projects fail. A lot of times they fail because of a misunderstanding or misalignment regarding budgets and timeframes, because they didn't really understand what they were building before they started building, and then they run out of money or run out of time to be able to deliver something. And so getting this alignment, that it helps all parties really understand, that end state.
It sounds like an incredibly iterative process. Like you seem to have, the template of the process really strongly in place. But then what sounds really appealing to me is the fact that you're able to really curate that at every stage to a specific company's, strategic goals and business needs and what's actually feasible. And Peter, your point about, money and time being like the biggest roadblocks, it makes me think like one thing I've learned as an adult is that money, time, and energy are the three things that are always dictating outcomes in some way or another, and how you choose to move forward. For instance, even like when you're debating taking, maybe the bus as opposed to an Uber, it's like, okay, well, I'm saving money, but I'm losing energy and time, for instance. That kind of thing. There's always some kind of trade-off. So that's really interesting to hear that the money and the time as well tend to be big issues. Just as my final question, David, can you share an example of how this approach has worked in a real project, especially when time, uncertainty, or complexity were major factors, or, for instance, as well, budget?
Sure. So actually, there's a recent example that I think is great. We were approached by a health tech startup, and it's founded by doctors, and they want to solve this problem that is huge, very costly, which is medicine adherence. Like if somebody, has a medical condition, requires them to be on medicine for a long time, or for an extended period, making sure that people, are taking it, that they're not having any side effects, and being able to, help them along, because some of the issues could be like somebody, stops taking it because they're like, hey, I feel great now. It's like, yes, so please continue taking it, and they might not take it, and then their symptoms come back. And, kind of depending on the medicine, missing certain, doses over a period of time could lead to significant, like it could lead to hospitalization or worse. So, this is something that they wanted to solve. They had a concept that they put together, where, you'd get a call and it'd be like, it'd ask a question about your medicine. Are you taking it? Press 1. They had an opportunity to pilot it. And they're like, we need something that we can, how do we convey this idea, buy-in for the pilot? We only have 4 weeks. So, what we did, we went through those phases that I described. And, one of the things that came out of that and talking about personas is like, okay, yeah, you may need to, automate some of these processes so that you can scale support for better patient outcomes. But it's really important to keep it human centered and not robotic, right? These are, your health is very personal, so we're able to work with them to identify, opportunities to use newer models where the conversation is very natural and it can flow and it can change language and all of these things, and you're not pushing buttons, or things like that. And the other thing too is just, knowing that, outside somewhere in a situation where they don't want to mention something on the phone, and so you can switch to an SMS approach, and again, you can, kind of pivot to that where you can check in with people. But basically in 4 weeks, using again some of these AI tools to build out these proofs of concept and those key functionalities, we actually gave them a fully functional proof of concept, that they were able to use. And they actually invited us to come in and present it, which I consider an honor, to have been asked that. And they got the go ahead to move forward with the pilot program. So, this is something that happened recently, but I think it's a great example of how combination of early discovery, and addressing core assumptions, and also using AI to help accelerate how quickly we're able to deliver value.
Yeah, that's an incredible example actually, because obviously it's impacting so many lives. Like literally, medicine is life or death situation. But as well, the fact that you're able to do that within 4 weeks, because when we were talking about time being a big constraint, I was thinking more like 6 months, for instance. But 1 month is that's pretty incredible that it was successfully piloted as well and had a great outcome in the end. Um, and again, like you were talking about the fact that you raised the point of you need to be careful about, these tools sounding human, because the last thing patients want to do when they're talking about like sensitive stuff is feel like they're talking to a robot. And probably, the people who were behind, the whole concept and innovation, maybe they were getting blindsided. Like they were like, we need to cut down time and make sure that X number of patients are on the best, they're following the best care plan with the help of these tools along the process, but maybe forgetting along the way because they're so focused on that particular angle. For instance, the human touch and the human approachability is so important along the way. Um, that was my last question, so I think we can wrap up on that point. Thank you very much for joining me today and taking the time to share your thoughts and share your tips as well, and real life examples of discovery and LPA processes. It's been an incredibly insightful discussion, and yeah, there's been some great tidbits that you've shared. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Zena. It was great speaking with you.
Thanks, Zena.